Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Mother's Nursery Tales from 1918. The author and the illustrator is Catherine Pyle. The important vocabulary words for Goldilocks and the Three Bears are: locks are strands of hair, a forest is a place with many trees, wander, to walk in a slow, aimless way, like you don't have any place to be, shrill, high-pitched, squeaky voice, wander, walk in slow, casual way, meadow, a grassy field, porridge is breakfast cereal like oatmeal, and fast is one of those multiple meaning words that can mean completely, or it's commonly used in fast asleep. Remember that stories have a main or central idea. This is the most important idea of the story. In fairy tales, the central idea is called the moral of the story because the story teaches a lesson about life. As we read Goldilocks and the Three Bears, think about its central or main idea. There once was a little girl whose locks of hair were so bright and yellow that it glittered in the sun like gold. For this reason, she was called Goldilocks. One day, Goldilocks went out into the meadows to gather flowers. She wandered on, and after a while, she came to a forest where she had never been before. She went into the forest, and it was very cool and shady. Soon she came to a little house standing all alone in the forest, and because she was tired and thirsty, she knocked at the door. She hoped the good people inside would give her some water to drink and let her rest for a little while. Although Goldilocks did not know it, this house belonged to three bears. There was a great big father bear, and a medium-sized mother bear, and a tiny little baby bear who was no bigger than Goldilocks herself. But the three bears had gone out to take a walk in the forest while their food was cooling, so when Goldilocks knocked at the door, no one answered her. She waited a while, and then she knocked again, and because still nobody answered her, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. There in a row stood three chairs. One was a great big chair, and it belonged to the father bear. And one was a medium-sized chair, and it belonged to the mother bear. And one was a tiny little chair that belonged to the baby bear. And on the table, there were 3 bowls of steaming hot porridge. Goldilocks thought, the people must be coming back soon to eat it. She decided that she would sit down and rest until they returned. So, first she sat down in the great big chair, but the cushion was too soft. Then she sat down in the medium-sized chair, and the cushion was too hard. So it was not comfortable either. Then she sat down in the tiny little chair, and it was just right and fitted her as though it had been made for her. So there she sat, and she rocked, and she sat some more until the cushion was flat. And still nobody had come, and the bowls of porridge were still on the table. They must not be very hungry people, thought Goldilocks to herself, or they would have come home to eat their food. And she went over to the table just to see if the bowls were full. The first bowl was a great big bowl with a great big wooden spoon in it, and that was the father bear's bowl. The second bowl was a medium-sized bowl with a medium-sized wooden spoon in it, and that was the mother bear's bowl. And the third bowl was a tiny little bowl with a tiny little silver spoon in it, and that was the baby bear's bowl. The porridge in the bowl smelled so very good that Goldilocks thought she would just taste it. She picked up the great big spoon and tasted the porridge in the great big bowl, but it was too hot. Then she picked up the medium-sized spoon and tasted the porridge in the medium-sized bowl, and it was too cold. Then she picked up the tiny little silver spoon and tasted the porridge in the tiny little bowl, and it was just right. And it tasted so good that she tasted and tasted and tasted until she had eaten it all gone. After that, she felt very sleepy, so she went upstairs, and there were 3 beds all in a row. The first bed was the great big bed that belonged to the father bear, and the second bed was a medium-sized bed that belonged to the mother bear, and the third bed was a tiny little bed that belonged to the tiny little baby bear. Goldilocks lay down on the great big bed, but the pillow was too high and she wasn't comfortable at all. Then she lay down on the medium-sized bed and the pillow was too low and that wasn't comfortable either. Then she lay down on the tiny little baby bear's bed and it was exactly right and so very comfortable that she lay there and lay there and lay there until she fell fast asleep. Now, while Goldilocks was still asleep in the tiny little bed, the 3 bears came home. As soon as they stepped inside and looked around, they knew that somebody had been there. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," growled the father bear in his great big voice, "and they left the cushion crooked." "And somebody's been sitting in my chair," said the mother bear, "and left it sideways." "And somebody's been sitting in my chair," squeaked the baby bear in his shrill little voice, "and they've sat and sat and sat until they sat the cushion flat." And he felt sad. Then the 3 bears went over to the table to eat their porridge. The father bear growled in his great big voice, "Somebody's been tasting my porridge, and they left the spoon on the table." "And somebody's been tasting my porridge," said the mother bear in her medium-sized voice, "and they've spilled some down the side." "And somebody's been tasting my porridge," squeaked the baby bear, "and they've tasted and tasted and tasted until they ate it all up." And when he said that, the baby bear looked as if he were about to cry. "If somebody's been here, they might still be here," said the mother bear. So the 3 bears went upstairs to look. First, the father bear looked at his bed. "Somebody's been lying on my bed and pulled the covers down," he growled in his great big voice. Then the mother bear looked at her bed. "Somebody's been lying on my bed and left the pillow crooked," she said in her medium-sized voice. Then the baby bear looked at his bed, and there lay little Goldilocks, with her cheeks as pink as roses, and her golden hair all spread over the pillow. "Somebody's been lying in my bed," squeaked the baby bear, "and she's still there." When sleeping Goldilocks heard the great big father bear's voice, she dreamed it was the thunder rolling through the heavens. And when she heard the mother bear's medium-sized voice, she dreamed it was the wind blowing through the trees. But when she heard the baby bear's voice, it was so shrill that it woke her up. She sat up in bed, and there were the 3 bears looking at her. "Oh my goodness!" cried Goldilocks. She hopped out of bed and ran to the window. It was open, so she jumped out before the bears could stop her. Then she ran home as fast as she could, and she never went near the forest again. But the little baby bear cried and cried and cried because he had wanted the pretty little girl to stay and play with him. Goldilocks has become a word that means something is just right, not too much one way or another, like a Goldilocks moment. Now let's talk about the central or main idea from the story Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. And here we have 4 choices. So, Do you think it should be that you should never walk in the forest alone, that big people shouldn't sit in small chairs, that you should never touch other people's things, or porridge tastes good and is good for you? What are you thinking? What was most of the story about? I'm thinking that the main or central idea for Goldilocks and the Three Bears would be, don't touch other people's things. That would be my thought.